How many have used it before? Okay, cool. This is the hashtag for the event. I'm sure you've seen it already. Any communication, just tag it with that. My name is Ali Ibrahim. I'm a software engineer in the San Francisco office. I've been at Google for about 5 years. I work a lot on like enterprise applications. So really quickly, I just want to give you an idea of where we're headed today. This is the agenda. I'm going to talk about what GWT is. How many of you guys know Java? Okay, so mostly everybody. So briefly, GWT is a framework that allows you to write Java code, and it translates the Java code into JavaScript. So it's mainly for like front-end web development. I'm going to show you guys some widget libraries, and then we're going to actually build an application. If we have time, I'll do some live coding, and you guys can see what it's like. Are you guys familiar with Eclipse? Okay, great. Okay, so this is GWT's mission statement. Let me just read it out. GWT's mission is to radically improve the web experience for users by enabling developers to use Java tools to build no-compromise AJAX for modern browsers. So this is a big sentence here, but the idea is the web experience is great. The applications that you build with Web Toolkit are amazing, beautiful. Many of the applications that Google builds itself is actually built with GWT. It's Java, so Java, mostly everybody knows Java, and that's a big win. It's also important if you have a large project. It's very hard to build a large project in JavaScript because you don't have type safety and stuff like that you do have with Java. And then AJAX is, we all know what that is. It's Web 2.0, like fast, snappy UIs and modern browsers. So when you build your application in Java, it compiles it to JavaScript, and it compiles JavaScript for each browser. So when you deal with JavaScript, you know that every browser is a little bit different, but Google Web Toolkit takes care of that for you. You don't need to worry about how the browsers are different and what you need to do for each of them. So really quickly, I want to give you a history of web development. I don't know why we need these boxes. They look really nice. Okay, so this is the classic web paradigm. So if you guys remember from like the 90s and the early 2000s, what we had is a browser that has a web page and a server that has the application. And the web page issues a request, and the server responds with an HTML page. Can someone tell me a little bit about what's not good about this paradigm? Correct. Every time there's a client request, you have to reload the whole page, and the user sees a white screen. So it's not optimal. The web page is static, and all interactions go through the server. So on the client side, there's really no logic, and so it's very slow. Then sort of Flash came along, and there's other plugins, and we have this paradigm where there's the plugin that lives on the client side, the page is here as well, and then there's request and response that go back to the server. The user interacts with the plugin, and then the plugin can also interact with the server. So can someone tell me what some of the drawbacks are with this? What's not optimal here?
Not all the users have this plugin.
Exactly. Right, and so not all the users have the plugin, and if you're in the emerging markets, some of the plugins are like 20 megabytes, for example, and so users they don't even have the time to sit there and download it. Other issues for developers is that the plugin is browser specific and OS specific, so there's a lot of idiosyncrasies, and the client has to download the correct one, and so it's not a great experience. They're also proprietary, so you have to learn that specific one. So now we have the AJAX mode, right, where we have asynchronous communication. So that fixes the issue that you mentioned earlier, where no longer are you waiting for an entirely new page. You can actually just send little bits of data back and forth, and on the client side, you can receive the data, process the data, and display it. So the application feels a lot nicer, feels a lot snappier. But I wanna highlight some of the drawbacks here, in that the JavaScript that you write in this example is browser specific. You have to know how the browsers are different, what you need to do, and JavaScript can be tedious to write a little bit. How many of you guys prefer Java over JavaScript? Just so I can get an idea. Okay, does anyone prefer JavaScript over Java? Okay, it's faster, right? It's very easy to debug, to write your application, but some of the drawbacks, it's sort of, when you want to write a big application, it's hard when you don't have type safety, and we'll get into that. But one of the advantages here is that there's no plugin. So in the world of GWT, Global Web Toolkit, you write Java code. And Java code gets translated into JavaScript. And there's no, you don't need to worry about a lot of the browser idiosyncrasies. The JavaScript gets automatically generated. And again, Java is really nice because it has a very strong type system. It's also static. And we'll get into that. So here's a piece of code. Can anyone tell me, there's a bug in this code. Can anyone tell me what it is? This is JavaScript, by the way.
The maximum.
Is it the array size?
No, the array is fine because it just, there's really no issues with JavaScript. The return values are here. Let me move out of the way. Right. So if you look closely here, there's a spelling mistake. Maximum number right here. So you can't tell if you're writing JavaScript, this is going to work, right? You write it, you put it on the website, you launch to production, and you get errors not beforehand, but because it's a dynamic language, you get it afterwards once it's already launched. So if this is the same code we're in Java, and if you're using any modern IDE like Eclipse or IntelliJ, you would know right away that there was a problem. And because it's a static language, it compiles ahead of time, and you can't launch it if there's a problem. So that's one of the big reasons why Java is nicer than JavaScript, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many people. And the other thing I mentioned is that when you write GWT, it actually compiles the JavaScript into several files. So not only does it target the browsers, but it also targets the locale. So if you, for example, want to support Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, and Opera, that's 4 permutations, and then you multiply it by the number of locales. So every locale will get their own JavaScript file, and when the user logs into the website, they'll download just the JavaScript for them, just for their browser and their locale. Are there any questions so far? Going a bit fast. No? Okay. Yes?
What about the problem of the platform independent when you compare the code from Java to JavaScript?
Yeah, what about?
So there's a problem for the platform independent?
Yes. Yeah, the browsers, it's getting better. The browsers are becoming more standard compliant, but when you write JavaScript, the JavaScript varies by browser. But when you write Java for GWT, it creates a JavaScript that's specific, that knows about the differences between them. So you can see sometimes a website will look good in Safari and it won't look good in IE or Firefox. And it's because the users didn't take that, the developers didn't take that into consideration. So another thing that's fully supported, which is great, is right to left, internationalization, and localization. So I'll show you guys, I have a demo. This is like one of the developer websites for GWT. So this is a basic, these are some basic widgets that come with GWT. There's of course like checkboxes and radio buttons. Here's like a calendar date picker. These are all widgets that you use when you're building your user interface. List box. The tree is kind of cool. Menu bar. You can build really cool things, like very easily with these widgets. you get the idea. But one of the most important things here that I want to highlight is the locale and right to left. So if you go here and you change the locale to Arabic, just like that, like it automatically works. Right to left works. There's nothing you need to do. So actually, one of the projects I worked on, we obviously created first for English, and then they wanted me to make sure it looked okay in Arabic, and I did nothing. Like I did absolutely nothing. I just told Wood to build a locale for Arabic, and it just worked. There was no additional issues. Sometimes there's issues with like images and stuff like that, but in terms of the layout, it was perfect. And so on top of the widget libraries, that was a very basic one. That's like the out-of-the-box widget library. But here's a list of them. There's lots of developers that are using GWT, so a lot of support in the community for the widget libraries. Let me show you one in particular. I think it's Smart GWT. It's a free library, and it has it has really amazing widgets. There's a couple here that I was looking at. Some of these calendars. Like this is a calendar widget that you just put in your application, and right away you have a calendar, day, week, month views, and it's very powerful. You can interact with it, and so you can imagine applications you can build very easily with some of these very powerful widgets. And all of this stuff is written in GWT. Okay, so what can you build here? This is a slide from many years ago that I found, and these are just some of the businesses on the web that are using GWT. I know like eBay uses it. Don't quote me on that. I mean, I know there's some of the larger websites that use GWT, and one of the biggest users is us. So Google, many of our products are in GWT. Has anyone used AdWords before? Yeah, so that UI is completely built in GWT. Orchid, there's a few more, I can't remember off the top of my head, but many of them, especially the enterprise ones. Some of the smaller applications like Gmail Gmail was written before GWT came out. Google Wave was written all in GWT. But yeah, many of our UIs are. So one other thing I really want to highlight is HTML5. It has full HTML5 support. So that's support for video and audio and Canvas and all of that stuff. And there's a very good demo. Has anyone seen the Google I/O from last year? Do you guys watch those videos? They had a demo for a product that used HTML5 and GWT. Can you remember what it is?
The video game?
Yeah, do you remember which one?
Sensor.
This is a hint right here.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah. So it's amazing. Like the fact that we can now have a full-on video game inside of a browser is a huge. It's a big deal. Because eventually, all of these apps that we're building for all these different platforms, we really believe that the future is on the web, and when you build an application for the web and it just works everywhere, that's much better for developers. So this is Angry Birds, and you can tell it's like the graphics are great, it's not slow or anything, and this is running in pure HTML5 and GWT. Yeah. It's a really fun game. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so I gave you an idea of the power.
So about the smart security, Sencha, GWT, or the Vadim, what do you suggest for us to use? For example, as I read before about the smart security contains some server-side can use very compact for
Yeah.
developers. The same for Vadim, but some developers said that Vadim is more powerful than smart security because of they use GPA for communication. I did that
know they exist, but we can talk afterward. Take a look. So now that I've given you sort of a sales pitch on GWT, let me talk about how to build applications. So I want to hopefully actually build something for you guys. Do you have a question? Yeah.
For example, was one we're talking about the differentiation between JavaScript and Java.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I know, both of them are open source, considered open
Correct.
source. Okay. So what's the point of programming in JavaScript then using the GWT to translate it to a Java platform?
So it's the opposite direction. You're writing Java. So everything in the browser is JavaScript. So you're asking what's the point of writing Java versus
Okay, so why
JavaScript?
don't we program by JavaScript directly?
So when you write with Java, you have type safety, and it's a big win, and it's also a static language. So when you have a large project, it's very hard to have a large project with no type safety, because if you have many developers, and you have many APIs, and the APIs don't have strong types, then you have many like runtime issues, and so it's hard to build a big application. JavaScript is great for smaller applications, and many people say that JavaScript is even good for big applications. But when you have a big enterprise application, we found that JavaScript just doesn't scale. You can't really build a large application in
So
JavaScript.
which part does it collapse JavaScript?
It's between like API boundaries. Like if I'm making a component, I can't like strictly define my API for another component because we don't have types. You just have a variable that comes in and you say, I'm assuming this is a string. Great. Okay, so I'm gonna try and build something. I have, let me show you what the application is. It's like a small voting application. Okay, so this is something I built earlier where there's 4 buttons here on the left side and you vote for your favorite fruit. This application, to give you an idea, this is built in GWT, very simple. It's using the G-chart API. So that chart that you see in the middle is rendered on the server and it's brought back using the G-chart API. And it's also running on App Engine. Has anybody heard of App Engine or used it? Okay, App Engine is basically Google's cloud. So when you have an application, instead of running it on your servers and maintaining your servers, you can build your application in the standard Apache with the war directory and everything, and then you send it to Google and Google will host it. Yeah, it's free. So it's free initially, and then if your application grows and you have like thousands and thousands of users, then you pay. But you know, if that's your problem, then it's a good problem. If you have all these users, you have to pay. So this is also running on App Engine. So I'll show you guys how to do that. So it's very basic. You click on the button and you vote, and it shows you live like the percentage of each of the fruits. So the first step is to build the UI, and then I want to show you guys how to build like the Ajax services. Then I'll show you how to build the chart, and then through step 3, I'm just going to use a fake database in the back end, and then in the end, if we have time, I'll show you how to use App Engine's APIs to build the database. So step 1 to build the UI. So you guys, it seems like everyone knows about Eclipse, or the majority of us do. There's a plugin for Eclipse that's great. It's a Google plugin, and it allows you to use Google Web Toolkit, App Engine. There's a lot of the APIs are there, and you install the plugin. I'll show you guys the URL at the end if you want to download it. But we're going to use the plugin today to build our application. There's a portion of it called GWT Designer. GWT Designer is fairly new. It was a company that created it, and Google acquired it because it's a really nice tool. You build the UI like you would with like a Windows Forms application. Are you guys familiar with that sort of like the Microsoft technologies for building Windows Forms and
Android.
yeah, and Android as well too. So this is straight out of that book. So you have like a palette here in the middle that has the widgets, and then you drag them to the right and you build your UI. And it's very powerful to be able to do this on the web in pure JavaScript. Like there's ASP.NET, there's some of the .NET technologies, but a lot of that stuff runs on the server side. This is pure client side.
What's the name?
It's called GWT Designer, but the thing you want to download is the Google plugin for Eclipse. So again, you're going to generate UI widgets, and it'll write the Java code for you. So you drag and drop, and it'll generate the Java code. It also generates the XML, which is what's used for layout. And you really drag and drop and very interactive. For each of the views, there's two components. There's the Java class, and there's the UI XML. UI XML is for layout again, and the Java class is for all the business logic. And so as you manipulate the UI on the right side, it'll automatically generate the XML on the left side. There's a tree component, which sort of gives you a tree view of your UI. It allows you to like manipulate it a little bit easier. And there's a properties pane. This will probably look familiar to most of you. On the top, there's all the properties. You click on a widget, you can manipulate the properties, and there's also an event view where you can handle JavaScript events. So on click, on drag, on drop, stuff like that. Here's the palette, which has all of the widgets. This has support for Smart GWT and embedding and all that. You can actually plug them in here and you'll see all their widgets.
Just support just 2.5, now 3.0, but doesn't support.
Oh, okay.
So I asked them, they said just wait.
Yeah. Cool.
I want to write the layout, which is the best way to use just Java as a practical layout, or use UI Minder.
We use UI Minder. Like the part that I work on, I think in general, if you're trying to do it, it's easier to see the layout in UI Minder. That's a very good question. On your project, did you use Java or UI Minder?
Sometimes some pages like some.
Yeah, that's normal. It's the same for us.
So sometimes I suffer also from how to build, for example, I have a website with 2 or 3 pages, how to build them in one UI Minder, and reload the content. I found some difficulties, so I used many.
Yeah, cool. Great. Oh, another thing is that if you create a widget yourself, you can actually add it to this palette. And so if you're working on a large team, some people can create widgets and then other people can use them on the team, which is really nice. So the design surface, this is where you'll spend most of your time. This is where you drag and drop and stretch things out. What's really cool is when you make a change in the UI, it does the smallest amount of Java code changes as possible. And you can see in action, it's really amazing. Some designers like this, you design it and then you hit like a done button or something, and when you go back, it has to regenerate all of the code. But in this case, it makes the smallest possible changes. So the development cycle is pretty nice. You write the code, you make changes in the UI, and then you save your changes, and when you go to the browser, you just refresh the browser and you see the results. And this is common, this is the same thing with JavaScript development or anything like that, but it's what you don't need to do is you don't need to recompile the whole application. Like compile meaning you don't need to get the Java and make it JavaScript. There's actually this thing called hosted mode, which is a simulated environment. So it won't take as long as you would think it would have to take. It's only when you launch to production do you actually have to generate the Java.
I did this small change and directly remit and the result compiled.
Yeah, you don't always have to. If you make changes on the server side, then you have to compile. If the change is only on the client side, then you don't have to. Okay, so let's get started. Are there any questions so far? Anything else? No? Okay. So I'm going to switch to Eclipse now. It's going to be a little bit small for many of you. I tried to increase the font sizes as much as I could. So this Eclipse has the Google plugin itself. Go ahead.
Because
Yeah, I think for the code, let me see. Can you read that? No? Okay.
I think you should increase the focus on the projector.
So I can increase the font or I can zoom in, but can you read this?
Yes.
I think that should work. Okay. So let me start over from scratch, and hopefully we can do this in 1 hour. Okay, so I have the plugin for the Google plugin for Eclipse installed, and the way you can tell is you'll see this little blue G at the very top right here. Right there's the blue G. Okay, so I go there and I say new web application. I give it a name. Package doesn't really matter. And one of the really cool things is it will install the SDKs for you. So if you have the plugin installed, it knows about the app engine and the GWT SDKs. And you just choose which ones you want. So in this case, we want the GWT one, obviously, and we also want the app engine one, because at the end, if we have time, I'll show you how to launch on app engine. And the last thing I want to point out is this generate sample code. As you guys are getting started with this, it's a good idea. It gives you the basic framework for the application, like the client side and the server side. So I'll just leave that checked. Okay, so now I want to explain this a little bit. So there needs to be a strict division between what lives on the client side and what lives on the server side. And the reason for that, there's many reasons, but one of the major ones is all of the stuff on the client side, that's going to be translated to JavaScript. The stuff on the server side isn't. Those are like the Java services that are running in the back end. So that's why there's like a client side and a server package. The other package shared, this is a package where you keep model objects. Does anybody know what serialization is? So this is a package where you keep things that you're going to serialize between the client and the server. So if you have like a model object that represents the user or fruit or whatever, you put it in the shared package so that the client and the server share it. The stuff in the shared package needs to be GWT compatible, so it has to be translated to Java because it also lives on the client. And then down here, there's the Word directory. Is this familiar to many of you?
Yeah.
Apache? So this will maintain the Word directory for you. There's a place here for jar files. There's the lib directory. So this is where we're going to put the app engine, the jar files, because it needs them on the server side. Okay. So that's the basics there. There's a sample application again that it created. So I'm just going to launch that and we'll see what that looks like. I want to make sure I'm not running any other processes. Okay, so let me run this. So right now this is starting up what's called development mode, and this is where you're going to spend most of your time. It's going to create an environment for us that's a simulated environment, and then it's going to give us a URL to use to interact with the application. So on the first attempt, it takes quite a bit of time. But after this, you can manipulate the code how you like, and then go back to the browser and just refresh. So in this application, it's very basic. It's just going to ask for your name, and you hit submit, and then the server responds like hi, hi, hi. Yeah, it's pretty slow the first time. So my name is Ali. validation has to be. It doesn't trust that you can have a name that's less than 4 characters. So it says hello, and then it tells you information about your browser and your operating system. So the first thing we're going to do is delete everything, because we don't need any of this. So let me go back here, and there's this, every application has something called an entry point. And the entry point is like the main function, for example. It's where it's the entry point. So this class right here implements what's called entry point. And every entry point has an on-module load. So on-module load sets up the UI. So there's, let me delete all of this code here. You can see stuff in here that you might recognize, like there's a panel that says sending name to server and all that stuff. Let me delete all that code and start from scratch. The other thing I want to delete is all of the HTML code. So in that application, there was actually some HTML that was static, and I want to delete that as well. So everything in the body tag, you probably can't read this, but it's not important. I'm just going to delete all of this. So when you build a good application, you can mix static HTML with JavaScript. But in this case, we want everything to be dynamic. We're going to build our UI dynamically, so let's just delete all of that code. So now I want to build the UI. The first thing, the UI, which package is that going to live in? Client, correct. So I go to the client package, I right click, and I say new UI binder. And in this example, we're going to use UI binder because XML is better to look at. So UI binder, that's the framework that allows you to write, allows you to use the web designer, and it'll create XML and JavaScript. I'm going to call this voting view. I don't want any of the sample content. I don't want the comments. Finish. Okay. So this is the Java code. I'll explain some of this stuff. It's not that important. This is just telling with I intend to use the XML that's called voting view and create that for me. And then this is the XML itself. It's empty right now. There's just basically there's an HTML panel there and nothing else. And the interesting thing is right here in the design mode. So let me hide some stuff. Can you guys all see that? Can you read these things? No. As good as so let me build this. So what do I need? Can you guys remember from the so let me create the buttons. If you look down here, there's a widget section. Button. I'll go over here and I'll add a button. Can anyone remember what the fruits were? Apple. Okay. Give me some fruits. What else do you guys like? I can't hear anybody.
Orange.
Orange. You said blackberry? That's advanced. Blackberry. What else?
Microsoft.
Microsoft. Okay, Apple, Orange, Blackberry, Microsoft. Perfect. Okay, so since we're going to interact with these elements, let's give them all names. So I'll click on the Apple button. Oh, I get it now. Apple. It's like the company. Orange is the cell phone. Cool. So it's not fruit. It's company. Apple button. Orange. The field that I'm editing is called UI field. That's just that's how you refer to the object when you're in the Java code. BlackBerry button at Microsoft. The other thing I want to do is I want to put a div, just like a simple panel for me to add the chart to when it comes back from the API. So there's something called simple panel here. I'm just going to add it. And I will call it chart panel. Okay. Now let's look at the Java code that was generated. Or we can look at the XML. We can go here to XML source. So if you look, you can see there's an absolute panel. Absolute means that you can like say specifically at what pixel you want a widget. It doesn't. If it's not absolute, then it just lays it out vertically. And so it has like the specific pixels, and you can see like Apple button, orange button, all that stuff. And if we go here to voting3.java, what the UI field does is it will actually bring in these widgets so we can interact with them in the Java code. So the private members of the class are the actual widgets themselves. And the last thing I want to do, now that I've created the view, I haven't put it anywhere. If you remember, there was the entry point and I cleared out everything. So now I want to actually attach the view that I created to the page. To do that, I'm going to use something called the root panel. So the root panel basically represents the body tag. So I'm going to say, give me the root panel, and I want to add a widget to it. And I want to add, what widget do I want to add here? Yeah, it's a voting view is what I call it. So this is going to create a voting view, and it's going to attach it to the DOM. It's going to attach it to the body tag. So let me run this and see if it works. Should be able to, I think I minimized that window. So if I refresh this. Okay, there it is, cool. So I have the buttons, they don't do anything yet. And right here there's an empty div that has what's going to be the chart. Are there any questions so far? Sure. Yeah, it's called root panel. There's a static method on root panel.get. And then you say, now I have the panel, and I say .add, and then I instantiate the voting.
So I just only add the new voting?
Yeah. So I mean, right now we're just building a basic application. Normally there'd be like a landing page or something like that, right? And a landing page might have your advertising stuff. But in this scenario, all we want to do is we created the view, and now we want to attach it to the body. Any other questions? Okay. What's next? I have my notes over here. Okay, so we want to make the view interactive, right? Now the buttons don't do anything. What do we want to do to the buttons? We want to add, yeah, exactly. We want to add events. We want to add listeners, handlers. It's all the same words for the same thing. So I go to the view, and I go to the design mode. Let me hide this again. Let me click on these buttons. And if you remember the properties panel right here, there's two views for it. One of them is the properties, and the other one are the events. So I click here. I don't know why the button looks like that, but it has like the antenna waves. And I can click on any of these events. In this case, what do we want to handle? On click. So I'll double click here. And now it takes me back to the Java code. So this is where I'm going to actually write the Java code for the event handler. So let me go back and just create the event handlers for all of the buttons. next thing I want to do is all of these things are basically going to have the same piece of code. So let me create a private method to handle the vote. Okay, so if all of these methods are going to call handle vote, what should they pass to that? What should the parameters here be? Okay. If you guys were to design this, so I haven't told you what I want to do here, but if you guys had to design this, if you wanted to pass like an option to this method, what would you create?
An object.
An object. What kind of object?
Of type, button.
Okay, so like if the Apple button is going to call this method, and the orange button, the BlackBerry button, the Microsoft button, what's different about them? Yeah, so I want to create like a company object or a fruit object, right? So I could create a class, or I could create an enum, right? Does that make sense? So if I want to have a way of representing a fruit, or in this case a company, right? So I could create, you guys mentioned they could create an object, right? So I could create a company object that has like a name string, for example. Or if I already know what all of the possible companies are, there's only a strict set of options, I can create an enum. You know what an enum is? Yeah, it's basically like a type that has like statically defined instantiation. So let me create an enum, and I'll call it company. And what were the companies we had? Apple, Orange, BlackBerry, Microsoft. Okay, so those are the 4 options for the company. So now when I go to the Java code, what should I do? The parameter to this method now is a company enum. And for now, just so that as we're building it, all I want to do is show an alert that says the name of the company that was chosen. So let me just say window.alert company.name. Name is a method on enum that gives you back like that piece of string that string. I think I can also call it a string. That's okay. So what's left? Right, so each of these methods I need to call a handle vote method. So what do I call in this case? I say company.apple.
Can we do it as a one handler that can handle even which buttons were clicked?
Yeah, so you can actually handle, you can put a comma separated list in this UI handler annotation, and then in this place you can look at what, the event object. You can see like, oh, what object was it, and then you can put an if statement. So there's 2 ways of doing it. In general, it's like you want to limit the number of forks in your code. Okay, and the last one, handle load. Okay, so what's going to happen now if I run this? What's going to happen if I click on the button? Okay, cool. So it says now we have a little bit more interaction with our application. We have some more functionality. Okay. Now, instead of keeping it on the client side, right now all we're doing is they click on a button and say, okay, you clicked on this button. That's a little bit boring, right? So we want to interact with the server. We want to tell the server the user did this, and now the server is going to store that information, right? So to do that, we need to add a service layer. Go back here. I have some slides on that. So we want to build a service layer, and we want to use a fake database for now. So if you remember, there's this interaction here, and this interaction between the client and the server is called RPC. Does everybody know what RPC is?
Remote procedure.
Right, remote procedure call. That's anytime one computer wants to call another computer, they have to use an RPC. So the way it works is, can anybody tell me what asynchronous means? Yeah, so you make the call and you, instead of waiting, you're told when the call is completed, right? So that's the nature of like AJAX, right? AJAX means asynchronous Java and XML. So when you have a snappy UI that's really fast and it's cool and you send a little bit of data, you get back, that whole idea, that whole concept is asynchronous. Instead of making a call and sitting there in the thread waiting, it actually makes the call and the thread continues, and when that call is finished, the thread gets interrupted, and then you can handle the response. So if you're creating the server side, you have a regular service interface called voting service. Then there's a service implementation, that yellow square. And on the client side, the client isn't going to call the synchronous service. Like in general in Java, everything is synchronous. There needs to be an asynchronous version of that same interface. So let me show you what that looks like. And that's the interface. The voting view isn't going to interact with the voting service directly. It's going to interact with the voting service async. So here's an example. The voting service, ignore just focusing on the top. What we want to have is an API where you send the company or the fruit that you want to save, and you get back enough data to render the chart. Does that make sense right there? So I say vote and get results. I pass the fruit, and I get back a map of. Oh, you can ignore the party. That was a different presentation. But it's basically map of fruit to integer. So I have a map now that tells me for each of the fruits what's the number of fruits that have been saved. In the second interface, this is the asynchronous version. The method is void, and that's because I'm making a call and I'm not waiting for a return value. I get called asynchronously via this callback. Does that make sense to everybody? It's a little bit confusing for people that are new to asynchronous, but if you're doing JavaScript, you should be a little bit familiar to it. And then lastly, the service implementation. This is where this thing implements the voting service. So the client calls the asynchronous version, and then on the server side, it ends up calling this service implementation. If it's not that clear to you, it's not super important. Are there any questions? Yes.
Is there a way I can access the web service? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any easy way to using RPC maybe and this stuff?
Yeah. So it depends on like which web services particularly you're talking about, but in this model, if your backend services are just regular Java services, so your Java code in the backend can contact any services it wants. And you can communicate via this mechanism. On the client side, you can communicate through, there's other options for communication as well. But this is the specific one that I want